And welcome back to the Dom Salvia Show. Thank you so much for listening. Jazzed as hell to introduce to you right now Wisconsin State Senator-elect Jodi Habush Sinykin. Congratulations on a bright spot and in other ways bleak day. Jodi, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
It is our pleasure to have you. New maps here in Wisconsin's 8th Senate District. Now, unfortunately, I moved away from the district this election cycle, Jodi, so I couldn't vote for you this time. But new maps seemingly have helped, but you've labeled yourself, Jodi, as a consensus builder as well. What do you think puts you over the top here?
It really was that message, our ground game, and all the thousands of doors, the meet and greets, the phone calls, the tens of thousands of postcards. It was an enormous community effort with solidarity such like I've never experienced before. That really is what got us there. As I'm sure you're aware, the communities in this district were the only ones in the country, really, of the few who avoided that red wave. Washington County, Waukesha County, the portions in Senate District 8 really held strong and actually moved bluer.
Jodi, you're still going to be in the minority in the state senate, hell, even in the legislature, as well as not all the senators were not up for election this cycle, and we'll still have elections in 2 years again. What would you like to see done? What do you think is important to produce and to do in order to fulfill your obligations, your promises, and what you think your constituents want?
Absolutely. What we want is progress. We want to move Wisconsin forward, get past all this partisan divisiveness and the take no prisoners approach, and start making the necessary improvements and investments in our local communities, in our education system, K-12 up through the university level, codify Roe v. Wade, and secure women's reproductive health for doctors and for families in Wisconsin. There's so many issues that we need to make progress on that have been held hostage for the last 10 plus years under the gerrymander.
And we'll have to continue to fight for those changes and moving forward. Jodi Habush Sinykin, Wisconsin's 8th Senate District elect. Jodi, there's been a lot of reflection here since the election last week. What's your experience? You've run before and you were not successful, and you keep trying, you keep fighting, you keep going, and you pulled it out this time. What lessons do you think you can that you learned might be applicable to everyone's reevaluating and looking back at what happened in this election cycle?
My experience the first time around, as you are well aware, was under the old maps. There is a 12-point disadvantage to any Democrat running in then Senate District 8. Under the new maps, that was cut in half. So we still had about a 6-7 point disadvantage, but we were able to overcome it, again, by really speaking to folks about the value of legislators in Madison working across the aisle with one another, which has long been Wisconsin's tradition as a purple state. I think that message of putting down a bit of the partisan camps that we've all separated ourselves in, to really try to understand each other, what it is that we need in our communities, in our nation, and try to figure out a path forward. That seems to be what has been missing a bit, and I hope that we can heal and make some progress at the national level too.
Jodi Habush Sinykin, Wisconsin State Senator-elect for the 8th Senate District here in the state of Wisconsin. Some of the criticism on the national level, Jodi, has been as a party that perhaps the Democratic Party has not supported, not gone after and tried to woo the working class of this country. Obviously, you pulled this out. What's your assessment of that critique?
In my meetings, I've met with so many unions and folks concerned about labor and people across this district, which includes many, many working people in Butler, in Lannon, Menominee Falls, Port Washington, you name it. I am talking to those people. And I think that there has been a lot done in recent years with the infrastructure deal and others to create opportunities. The apprenticeship programs are phenomenal. I find them so inspiring in ways that we can help our young people move into good careers and good lives for their families of the future. So I think that some of it is a communication problem,
Yeah.
that they haven't been able to express all the good that has been done and is going to continue. So that is really where I have experienced in our district that we are doing very important things, and talk comes cheap. It's easy to say things and to make promises, but I think people should really look to see what has actually been done to help families.
Jodi, and again, congratulations. I love the fact that you've continued to fight, and with these new maps, you were able to pull it out. And a lot of the reaction that I've seen for success for governance is state and local government. I mean, if you want to make changes on the ground where you're at, you have to get involved on the local level. And we're always going to have to deal with a national issue, let's call it. But when it comes down to the state and local level, it becomes very hands-on, very personable, very face-to-face. Overcoming the communication, or I don't know if it's communication, perhaps. If there's a difference in understanding of what the facts may be. As you mentioned, the Infrastructure Act and some of these efforts that were put forth and actually passed under the Biden administration, some folks didn't think it did anything for them. And some folks, when you talk about, well, these tariffs could increase costs if proposed by the Trump administration, could actually increase costs and increase inflation. Some folks really don't hear that. How do you successfully breach that? Because people get very sensitive if they're not aware of a particular fact or in this environment. And I've had personal conversations with friends that have been really defensive about their position if I bring other facts and new facts to light. And when we deal on a personal level, on a state and local level, what's the best way do you think it is to approach perhaps a difference in not just opinion but in what we would perceive as facts with those that may not be aware or don't agree with it?
Yeah, I think it's very much what you're saying is the conversation. First, having a conversation. At all these many, many countless stores, I always would start with what's top of mind for you and try to understand what it is, what their concern lies, whether it is with healthcare, whether it is with taxes, whether it is with inflation, whether it is with community safety concerns, education, and start there and try to get an understanding of what is really bothering them and try to offer solutions on where there can be progress. For example, in the Senate District 8 communities, there is these ongoing school referenda that have come up year after year after year in certain communities. And that's simply a consequence of there not being sufficient funding, notwithstanding the progress in shared revenues under Act 12. More needs to be done at the local level for more autonomy and more funding so that communities are not forced to have to raise their property taxes on themselves just to guarantee appropriate services and education for their children. That is money out of their pocket. Those increased costs at the local level just means that there's less money to pay for groceries, to pay for other life expenses. So I try to explain what we can do at the state level or at the local level. We sure as heck can't take on national price gouging by these corporations at the local level, but we can do things that keep more money in people's pockets here in Wisconsin, and of course, make those necessary investments in our schools and in our communities so that we can have the best possible lives for our families.
Jodi, I always thought, when the politicians say, oh, first they're all about local control, and then they're not about local control, then they are about local control. So I guess it depends on what the circumstances are. But no one wants to raise taxes. No one wants to be, no elected official wants to come in and say, I'm going to raise your taxes because we need to do X, Y, or Z. I thought in some regards, the politicians that voted for this were wimping out to the degree that now they don't have to make those hard, quote unquote, decisions. they're just going to let the referendum, and everyone's going to do their own referendum and let them raise taxes on themselves. And so now the politicians, they're not the bad guys, bad girls. You know what I'm saying? How much of that plays into it? That people the politicians, the lawmakers just don't want to have to be the ones to say we're raising your taxes.
Yeah, I think it's even more than that, given the gerrymander. We have a $4 billion plus surplus, as in billion. We have opportunity to make necessary investments in those matters like childcare, like our schools, like our universities, etc. But it has been held hostage by this legislature, particularly by the Joint Finance Committee, where my opponent, Dewey Strobel, was a co-chair. There has been this partisan war to hold back the release of funding that we could go forward on. For example, the literacy bill that he touted time and again on the radio and in literature, that the legislature approved and the governor signed off on $50 million to go into the schools for literacy coaches, curriculum, etc. But the Joint Finance Committee has held on to over $49.5 million of that 50. Same with PFAS remediation, same with the money due the Western Wisconsin hospitals, on and on. We have the money available to help families in Wisconsin and to lower costs and to help them. But it has been held hostage by these partisan wars.
Jodi Habush Sinykin, Wisconsin State Senator-elect for Wisconsin's 8th Senate District. Just a few more minutes, Jodi. On the education, the vouchers and school choice and those kinds of issues, it seems to me that we have basically two parallel, and one of them an unfunded school systems. Now, I was a product of private school, at least high school. My parents made that decision to pull me out of a public school and put me into private school, and went to pocket to go do that. What's your sense on the seemingly massive growth over the last 20 years on school choice and school vouchers and so on? And is there some sort of unwinding or something that we can do to at least mitigate the continued growth? How do you see these two different parallel but different school issues proceeding in the next 6 years?
It's an excellent question. I too have been observing that growth. And what we basically are having now in Wisconsin is two separate school systems that require funding. And that is not sustainable. So what we need to make sure that we're taking care of is holding these school systems to similar standards of accountability and transparency. And particularly when it comes to special education funding, there needs to be comparable standards so that the public school system isn't unfairly burdened with special education needs that is paid at such a disparate rate than the voucher schools, which places enormous burdens and a disadvantage on our public school system. So there just needs to be a really good and careful look at this, because everyone, I think, can agree that we need an excellent education system for our children, for Wisconsin's future, for our economy. And there is so much dysfunction out there and lack of accountability that I'm very much hopeful that we're going to make some progress on this and address the concerns that you just raised.
Jodi Habush Sinykin, Wisconsin State Senator-elect for Wisconsin's 8th Senate District. Congratulations on your victory. The 8th Senate District is very lucky to have someone like you representing them. We look forward to you serving your seat, and hope you come around a lot here in the future. Thank you so much, Jodi.
Thank you, Dom. I appreciate it. And thanks, Jess. Appreciate
Always. Folks, this is the Dom Salvia Show, 855-752-4842. Going to come back with some of your calls, 855-75-CIVIC.